great day, everyone. Ed Dudley, once again, coming out of Durham, North Carolina. It is an absolutely amazing day. It's a beautiful day out here. Even though it's overcast, it's a beautiful day because I get to hang out with my only girlfriend. My only girlfriend, because my wife allowed me to have one girlfriend over in South Africa. Miss Jermaine Subramani, how you doing, friend?
I'm fabulous, my Zulu Ed. It's always a pleasure and a privilege to actually spend time with you in the Ubuntu House. Well, we have sunshine, but it's winter here, so therefore my coat. So yeah.
How have you been? Because we haven't chatted in a little while. How are you doing?
I'm great, actually. I'm fabulous. Things are good. We have some political issues, but we're not even going to spend time chatting about it. I need to ask you, how is the men's group coming along?
Oh my goodness, the men's group is absolutely coming along amazingly. We had a session last night. We had a bunch of guys that just got together and we shared and talked. The ages were like 32 to 80, and men just started sharing some things that they haven't shared before. I mean, one of the best things is we had one gentleman that is a therapist, and he sat there. He said, over the span of my career, and he's up there in age. He says only 10% of his clients were men. He said this is a much needed space, and then he said, I need this space. He said this space is great for me because I can open up and share things that I'm not even sharing with my wife. So he was like, thank you for the space. So we had one gentleman drove an hour and a half to get there, which absolutely blessed me. But things are going great with that. I'm looking forward to that expanding, and we need more spaces across the globe for men to come together, sit, chat, share, and just get that weight off them. So thank you for asking.
I couldn't agree more, actually.
Yeah.
Because men need safe spaces, and I don't believe there's enough of those. And I'm always excited.
You are.
I'm going to be spending the rest of the afternoon with two amazing men, both 6 feet and 6.1 and 6'5", actually. So big men. But what I love about them is they both have big hearts. And they are nurturing souls. And we have a name that rhymes, actually. So I can't wait to speak about a topic that is so important, critical, and necessary globally. Should we just bring him in?
Let's just bring him on in. Great day, Mr. Stanley.
Hey, everyone. How's it going?
Fabulous. It's
going well. Going well.
All right, great to have you in the Ubuntu House. So excited for you to share your story and demonstrate how we should do things differently and create the awareness necessary to drive positive DEI outcomes. So, Ed, are you going to introduce the man, or is the man going to tell us a lot about himself?
You know, I want him to share a little bit about himself. I had a chance to connect with him on LinkedIn and saw a lot of amazing things that he's doing. And I would love for you to introduce yourself, but not your bio.
Just me. Right?
I want who are you? You know, and what's your passion? I love to start there.
Well, this could be a whole episode just talking about, my upbringing, where I come from, all those good things. But my name is Jermaine Stanley, as the screen shows. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, but I live in the greater Washington, D.C. area. And, I'm a product of what you call the Detroit Public Schools. And you probably relate to this. There are, school districts that just aren't doing well or haven't done well historically, right? And Detroit Public Schools is one of those. And I can actually say I'm honored to be a student or grad of that district. I'm proud to be a Detroiter, or from the D as we say it, right? And not D as in Dallas. We're talking Detroit,
as in
Michigan.
Don't ever say Dallas around me,
So, I went to Alabama A&M University, which is a historically Black college university here in the United States. And I know Charmaine and I talked about this. You have similar schools or segments of your educational system that are similar to ours. And, for those who may not know much about Detroit, historically, Detroit has been one of those areas where it's a blue collar town. The automotive industry is king there. The big three are there, right? And a lot of those folks work in those factories, right? So the mentality is one of stick to itness, right? And all those other good things. So, going to Detroit or growing up in Detroit, I wanted to, leave. And I wanted to be around my friends and things like that, but because of drugs and crime and, I was, allergic. I had just an allergy to bullets, and eyes and things like that. And it happened. It's not saying it's unique to Detroit. It's just, that's what happens in the inner cities, right? So I had this yearning to be more and to do more. And college was that thing. Now, a secret that only close friends, and I consider y'all close friends of mine now, I wanted to be an astronaut when I grew up. Yeah.
Good.
I wanted to be an astronaut, yeah. But, the capsules during those times, the vehicles that you flew in, they're very small, and I'm a tall yeah. So go to the next best thing, right? So I went into matriculated through Alabama A&M University, electrical engineering bachelor's, right? And then I went off and got my master's in software engineering. I've worked in the energy business. I worked in consulting. I even worked in .com, for those who don't know what .com was back in the day. The internet was born, the commercial internet, that is. So I was one of the few, and I'll say it, brothers, working in that space. And a lot of the things that happened early in my career set the tone for how I feel about diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, for those. In other parts of the world, they say, diversity, equity, and belonging, and inclusion and belonging. So it's all related, right? But my passion started back then. Now, did I realize that was my passion back then? Not until I was older in my career did I understand that, there's a passion I have about helping others overcome, or others achieve, or others be in a good place when it comes to living here in the United States, right? So the pandemic, all the things that have happened, the racial reckoning that we've had in our country, Ed, about this. And a lot of the folks are coming to the realization, like, wow, I didn't realize I had that privilege because I was white, And I have a lot of friends who are white. I consider them some really good friends of mine. Throughout my career, I can touch on more than a handful of people, more, multiple handfuls of people who are not considered Black, brown, or other. I'm also Latino. I mentioned that to Charmaine as well, that I have that other intersectionality, right? Being a Black man in America, also Latino, things of that nature. So when I reflect on my career, it was a struggle when I reflected on it for me. And Ed, you remember the code switching, right? Remember that, Charmaine, code switching? You change how you act, how you look, how you talk, and stuff like that.
You show up one way, and then when you leave, you're like, all right, let me throw my hoodie on and my sneakers, and I'm good, and I can go back to the hood and hang out with my friends. All right, the next day I gotta get up, put my blue suit on, my white shirt, and my tie, and walk straight, and
I can see this conversation being absolutely fun.
Yeah.
impactful knowledge share to
Yeah.
get the desired outcome. It's going to be incredible. You've done such a good taking us through your journey, and I love
Yep.
that. But I do need to ask you something.
Go for it.
Sam, dishwasher. Speak to me quickly about that.
Dishwasher.
Volunteer dishwasher.
Oh,
SOME.
Yeah, so Others May Eat. That is a local food bank here in the DC area. And way back in maybe 2015-ish or something, my wife and I had this idea that we would help the kids. Our kids are all now out of high school, but get them to understand responsibilities and giving back and things of that nature. So
Fabulous.
we said, we're going to start going down here. So we volunteered one early morning. You have to go early in the morning. And I would say it's like 5 in the morning we're down there. And so they put us in different locations within the food bank, and people are outside lined up, waiting to come in. And it's such an impactful thing. Let me say that, it's such an impactful thing for these folks to have resources available to them, because a lot of folks are homeless. A lot of folks are down on their luck, and surprisingly, a lot of young people. Okay. So we're in there, and we get the dishwashing duty. So that's what I put down. I wash dishes. So as the folks finish their food, they obviously, like a cafeteria style, right? You stack them up and you put them out the window. So we would get them and, get the gun, spray the water and soak them up and rinse them off again. And
Love it.
Which is fabulous. The reason I actually asked you to show that is because it's important for us, for people to realize, no matter what you've achieved or where you've been, always make time to give back.
Absolutely.
Time, energy, your space. And so often we don't talk about that.
Right.
And we need to normalize those kind of give back situations. And so friend, talk to us. Okay, from an engineering background, DEI, we understand exactly why you step into the space, but I would love for you to define each element of it. And
before you go there, I got a question for you. You talked about the racial equity, the racial reckoning here in the States. That's how Charmaine and I met. Mm-hmm. We met through that racial equity reckoning in what we think it was June of 2020. Mm-hmm. That we met late May because of that. But you said something earlier. You said something started you on this path early in your career, set the tone. Mm-hmm. What can you remember back that triggered you to really say, you know what, this happened in my career, and now I really want to focus on supporting and helping DEI, because as a Black man in corporate America, surrounded by individuals that don't look like you, I'm sure you went through a lot of microaggressions and a lot of other stuff, but is there one point that's a trigger point that you can remember that started you on that journey?
Well, a lot of us like to say 2020 kind of was I'm tired of sitting on the sideline kind of thing. Mm. And that was a moment for me. Now, as I said earlier, I started fueling that passion, but I didn't realize it was my passion. Right? But since I've been involved in these volunteer organizations, like I am a board member, two tech nonprofits. I'm president of one here locally in Greater Washington, D.C. called ISACA, Greater Washington, D.C. And we give back. We're 501(c)(3). We are a nonprofit, and you see the impacts that you're doing. We raise guide dogs to become We raise dogs rather to become guide dogs for the blind. That's what we've been doing. So when this racial reckoning occurred, I said, I have this, and the idea of switching gears. I did start a company that was mostly focused on cyber and IT risk and things of that nature. But I called my web guy, and I said, I want to change the branding. So we changed it, to focus on this DEI. And for me, I would have to say that was the moment although I had the confidence and the awareness that I had this passion, that was probably when I decided to just be out there and using my platform to do what others are doing, and that is keep the conversation going, right? And I'm gonna go a little historical here on you. So you all in South Africa had Black Economic Empowerment, or B, right? So I did my homework, actually.
I see you did.
Because I visited there, right? So that was back in 05, though. So I've known about this since 05, and it was an eye-opener to us because in the United States, and you know where I'm going with this, we have affirmative action, which was designed way back in the 60s to help level the playing field when it comes to equity in the workplace, equity in America. And that's kind of when the concepts of diversity and inclusion and equity, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, really started to form in the United States. So we fast forward to now, that's where we are. But if you think about historically, Ed, you know how this works. The cycles, right? You start talking about it, it dies, and it kind of becomes background noise, right? And that's what happened for lots of years. We knew these things were happening. We knew things were happening in our country that were still setting us, at a certain level, or keeping us at a certain level. The systemic racism is what I'm getting at, right? And technology, I'm sure we'll try to touch on that. Technology today, see, back then it was all about protest and, people putting signs, or people coming around your house and trying to intimidate you, and what they call redlining in our country, where they keep all the impoverished Black people in a certain section of an area. And that's how they did it back then. Now technology is being used to proliferate that, right? Or I said that right, I think I did. So you know where I'm going with that.
I get you.
Yeah. So all these things fed, and it's okay, wait a minute, Jermaine, you have a good network, you're respected, right? People like to hear what you have to say. Do this. And that's what I've done. And that's what Stanley Consulting Group is, really focused on. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
All right.
Definitely.
I love this.
Okay.
Let's keep going.
Go ahead, Jermaine.
I love it too, actually. Talking about 2005 be an affirmative action. I have a story to share at some stage if we have time, but let's not go there. I'm curious, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's more than races, diverse ethnicity, right? Diverse race groups or ethnic.
Right.
Oh my God, help me pronounce it.
Ethnicity. You're okay.
Contagious. See, I started something. It's contagious.
You
I'm
did.
sorry.
It is contagious. Good energy is contagious. Loss of words is contagious. Let's not let that be part of the game today. Okay, cool. So talk to me a little bit about that and the passion for wanting to have diversity and not just being focused on racial diversity. Jermaine.
Wow. Yeah. So again, a whole nother show if you wanted to do it, but I'll be brief, right? So it's obvious that when people hear diversity, first thing that comes to mind is people of color, people who are not of color, right? That's how a lot of people look at it. And it's not all about the color of your skin, right? Charmaine, you're a woman. That's diversity within your team. So we're talking in a corporate setting, right?
Sure.
And that's why our focus is on corporations and organizations, helping them along their DEI journey, right? And the diversity in thought, because we can be all the same color. I don't care if we're blue, pink with polka dots on us. We're going to have we have different mindsets. So that's diversity in thought. We have diversity in experiences, right? Ed shared where he grew up. You shared where you are, In your neck of the woods, Charmaine, you call it colored, and that's OURED, not ORED.
Damn, you can spell, can't you?
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
First time she sent something over to me spelled like, I was like, man, she
What?
spelled that wrong. So wait a minute, that's not how it's spelled. Take that U out.
Yeah, and
But
that's the
that's the
thing.
way we spell it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the thing, right? So it's, and then of course your experiences, your education, those are all different ingredients that an organization needs on their teams, right? To foster innovation and creativity and just a well-balanced culture, if you ask me, right? And the companies that do it well, they're at the top of the list every year, right? So there's companies that are consistently at the top of the list of the top companies around DEI. Accenture, United Airlines, American Airlines, a few of these places, just to name a few. And, you know, McKinsey, the global consulting firm,
Yeah.
Harvard Business Review, which is my go-to, they do reports every year about how folks are doing, you know, with regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, you know, to get back to your question, Charmaine, it's important to have a balance of that in your cultures, right? And so yes, you have to look at it. The other areas of diversity, how you identify yourself, if you're LGBTQ plus, or if you are someone who has special needs, someone who is neurodiverse. And for those who may not understand what neurodiversity is, those are the folks that are who have mental challenges, folks who are also on the autism spectrum, right? And you have to account for those things. And there's organizations out there like the Hero Autism Project, right? They're out of Chicago. I know them very well, Hugo and Tamika Morales. And Morales, I'm sorry. Good people. And they're doing great things, helping families adjust,
Sure.
bringing resources. So yes, a lot of those things are diversity to me, not just the color of my skin. Does that help? Does that resonate? Does that?
Yes, actually, because
right.
often,
Okay,
and what I would hate for is people of a certain race group to shut down with the assumption that all we're going to be talking about is racial diversity.
Right.
And diversity is so much more for productivity, because often, I mean, unconscious bias, right? We gravitate towards people that look like us, act like us, or speak like us. That's our comfort zone.
Yep.
And allowing other people to come in. I mean, I can share a couple stories about my experience in the early years.
Go ahead, share. So the reason why I share, because it's by sharing our stories that people get a glimpse of what's really going on sometimes, how we're made to feel. Because I have a litany of stories from being in finance world of things that I went through. Some I've shared publicly, and some I kept to myself, and some I've only shared with my wife. So please, Charmaine, if you got a story to share that.
Talking about 2000s, I was in my late 20s. I get employed as a senior head of legal services, manager. To be honest, I was the only person of color and female in a boardroom, primarily of white men. That's it. And primarily of Afrikaans white men. So in the first month that I'm there, because there's talk about the fact that this legislation coming and Black people need to be brought into the fold. I'm in the boardroom where they're talking about getting more Black people in there, but I'm sitting there. So like, I'm there to make the numbers. Get asked to do an opinion, I do an opinion. Go into a meeting, just white people, white men. And the executive at the time, I'll be correct, was John Henderson, who was an actuary. And there were about 6 actuaries in the room. So Jermaine, diversity of thinking, diversity of thought, actuaries are put on a pedestal. They're the smartest people in the room. Who am I? I'm a lawyer, right? So I get told I should not, by Mr. John Henderson, who was an actuary, I should not come into his territory and tell him how to run his business. So my response to him was, you clearly employed me for my brain, didn't you? So I'm going to speak. And I get told to keep quiet, actually to shut up. And he put his back to me and I'm sitting there. And that experience, I was in my late 20s, I could have chose to be broken and never open my mouth again, but it propels me to continue to speak up when I'm at the table. And that's why I'm as vocal as I am. So those are experiences where when actually spoke, everybody listened. And because I was not going to give an opinion that allowed for the sales force to earn more money, that I wasn't sure or didn't know what I was talking about. So those are like, and the other point I needed to make, the next day, my boss calls me a tiger and go, oh my God, you're a real tiger. I was like, don't tiger me. You weren't even there to support me. You was in the room. Another actuary, Gary Schoonby, comes into my office and asks me, do you know who you spoke to? I was like, yes, I do. You need to apologize. And my response was, why should I? I wasn't wrong. It's a career limiting move. I was like, so be it. So those are things that was used to condition people, to silence them, just to make up numbers.
Yeah.
And
So, yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. And that opens me to ask Jermaine a question. I have my personal opinion and thoughts about it. We see a lot of companies here in the States. They have a chief diversity and equity inclusion officer, however you want to name it. Why do you think the vast majority of them have Black women running that initiative?
Wow. Yeah. Hey, man, I was talking to somebody about this, and they assume that because they are Black and they're a woman, that they could relate.
make up the numbers.
Yeah, and meet the numbers and put up, some people might do it for show, right? And I'm sure the people who are in those seats really are trying to do a great job. They're really trying to make change happen. And I tell you, it's frustrating for a lot of them because it is a check the box exercise.
Yep.
Right. And I tell you, it's not fair to them. If you're going to make meaningful change, I'm speaking to the leaders out there, these corporations, right? I gave a speech or talk on this earlier this year. And I said, you got to be in this DE mindset. You got to set the tone. You got to have it in your mantra, your ethos, right? And if you don't, it's not going to proliferate into your organization. Ha, I got that word right. Yes. So, so back on the point of the question, especially now because of what happened during the last 2.5, 3 years, a lot of them were installing women of color. Very few Black men are in those space. And then the ones who are, they're experiencing similar things, right? They get in there and they don't have the what's the word I'm looking for? The breadth of power or influence to make meaningful change happen. It's kind of like sit in your corner. Now, the companies who do embrace it, as I said, they're doing well. They're doing really well. And as I said, the reports are out there. And they show you where they were the year before. You can look at the reports 5 years ago, and they're still near the top of the list. These companies are doing it well because they're not only talking diversity, they're also talking equity and inclusion. And those are probably more important, not saying diversity is important, in this equation. Because without it, that diversity doesn't mean anything. That's the check the box exercise kind of thing, right? I'm going to point to another movie. I know I told you about one before. It's called White Hot, the Rise and Fall of Abercrombie and Fitch, right? That's the clothing company, A&F, here in the United States. And they had a chief diversity officer who happened to be a Black man. And he was shown to be kind of a, keep the status quo versus really trying to make something happen. That's how they portrayed him. I'm sure that was frustrating to him, but you hear where I'm going with this. It's just, it's frustrating to those people. But why they have them, I think, is more or less for the majority. And people can call me out for this. Some are genuine about it, meaning businesses and leadership, like we really need to do this the right way. Others are still doing things that are not genuinely going to help, right? So it's really hard for them.
Yeah,
That's great question.
That's good. So, one of the things, you touched on, and I will tell you one thing that really frustrates me. And then another question to follow up for that is, why do you think there's not really a lot of Black men in the space? But the thing that really frustrates me about a lot of companies here in America, the buzzwords, diversity, inclusion, diversity, inclusion, diversity, inclusion. I'm like, all right, that's nice. A lot of times I look, as soon as you say that, I look at the top of the house. What does your board look like? What does your senior leadership look like? Mm-hmm. Because honestly, you can talk about diversity and inclusion all that you want.
Right.
And it's not something that you push from the bottom up.
Yep.
It's got to be from the top down. And I don't see a lot of companies really putting anything behind it. But you can answer my question as far as why I don't think there's a lot of Black men. Or not even just Black men, men of color.
Yes.
Hispanic men, Latin men sitting in those spaces.
Well, I like what you said just before this. Let's get back to that in a second.
Okay.
I think it's the opposite. I think with regards to men of color, men of stature, educated Black men, educated Latino men, there's a fear that, this might be an angry Black person that they're putting in this seat, right? Or it may be intimidating to have a man in that seat as a chief diversity officer. Go ahead.
But that's where the unconscious biasness comes into play.
Exactly.
And therefore, we need to have more conversations of this sort to create the awareness. Because unless we go into uncomfortable spaces and have these conversations, the narrative is not going to change.
That's true. I also touch on the other part of that, and that is studies show that women are better organizers than men. So there's also this other part that you got to consider too, not just to slam all these companies. They may feel that a woman might be more suited for, because technically women are considered the nurturers in our society. Again, another stereotype, another type of bias, right? And that's unfortunate, because there's a lot of great individuals, men and women, who could do this job and do it well because they can relate to it. So for instance, you said something that struck a chord with me. You look at the top, I'm going back to this ad, you got the top and no one looks like you. And I've worked in many companies early in my career that was that case. Only person who come in the room, I'm a tall guy, I stand out like a sore thumb. It's not hard to miss me, right? And it's like, wow, they'll set you back, right? So you hear stuff like, when it comes to promotions or bonuses and things like this kind of stuff happened to me in my career. I kid you not. And it was like, Bob, he had a great year. Maybe next year's your year. So they're gaslighting us, right? The whole time. And you're frustrated because you're like, I'm working 5 times harder to just fit in. Just before I come in the office, I got to fit in. I can't be my authentic self. It works all these right? So when you come into a company and you look at the board and you look at the makeup of the leadership team and you're saying, wow, and they're talking diversity, and then they plug in someone who is not saying that this may be a bias of mine, a person who is white that's talking diversity. Now, they could be an ally and educated on this stuff and really be all about it. And there are people out there like that. And I do commend them for crossing the line and saying, okay, this is not fair to others. right? I'm going to use what my platform allows me, having, the privilege to do that as a white person in America. I'm going to help. And there are a few people out there like that. When I say few,
yeah.
we're talking hundreds of thousands, but
Yeah.
So the other part of that is, if I'm a candidate looking for a job, if I'm someone coming out of school right now, because the Gen Zs and millennials, they're on something else.
And whole different breed.
Whole different. And we got them here. All right. So it's like they're checking. How do they handle diversity, equity, and inclusion? A lot of them, identify as they versus he, she, or him, right? And they don't want to be categorized as a binary, right? So they're looking at how companies are embracing. They're looking at those reports that I told you about to see, okay, I want to go work for a company like that, because they will allow me to come in and be my authentic selves, which is what I struggled with being earlier in my career, which led me to code switching. And I said this publicly during my last talk. I struggled with that, Jermaine and Ed, until early 2010s. And we're in 2022 right now. So it's only really been 10 years of my 30-year plus career here, right? So I struggle with it quite a bit. But I wanted to be able to share that with people, that, hey, you can overcome it.
You and I could sit and have this conversation like all day. The one thing that you just said resonated with me is the code switching.
Yeah.
Because I worked in the financial sector for years. And you already know what that financial sector looks like. Average age is about 55, a white man.
Yep.
And I code switched for decades.
Yep.
And it did not bring my authentic self to work. And I'm going to share a quick little story. I went to my senior manager, brought all of her leaders to for drinks after work. We sit down and just talk and just laugh and share. And we're sitting there. I'm the only man of color. And she's a beautiful woman. She passed away, God rest her soul, Eileen Bird. Loved her to death and enjoyed working with her. So we're sitting there, and she looks at me. She says, Ed, when are you going to shave? So at the time, I just had a goatee. She said, I can show you a book that was written with statistics that show that men with facial hair are not trusted as much as men with no facial hair. I kindly smiled to her, and I simply said, I can guarantee with 100%, you can keep my salary for the whole year. Don't pay me. I'll come in and work for free. But I can guarantee 100% that book was written by a Caucasian man, and all of his research was taught. Everyone he talked to was Caucasian. And she sat back and she looked at me. She says, I never thought about that. Ever. Mm-hmm. That was a bias of hers and many, and think clean shaven. Mm-hmm. You show up in corporate America.
Yep.
I like my facial hair. Typically, black men like facial hair. That's us. And, we can talk about the assimilation that many of us, had to do in corporate America to rise and grow and things like that. But yeah, we can go on and on. Charmaine, go ahead and ask your question.
No, I'm just listening, actually. I can relate to your facial hair, my hair. Many a times, there's a reason why I actually wear my hair the way I do, actually. But that's a story for another day. I want to get into, diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's a need for it. There's benefits to corporates actually embracing that. There's benefits for us showing up as our authentic self. And it saddened me to actually hear you guys couldn't show up as yourself. Well, I was lucky that I didn't care. I just showed up, and I used to annoy the world. But that was a story for another day. So it was an energy zapping for me. It was like, yeah. The point I want to get to, Jermaine, I mean, from a coding, I mean, racism and inequality was largely influenced by people's unconscious biasness or intentionally, whatever it is. We're not going to unpack that now, but I'm curious to know about the concept of coding and how that is going to continue to perpetuate racism in terms of an AI perspective. Would you mind just sharing a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, so, and I'm assuming coding as in programming, not
Yes,
using
please,
code
not
stitching,
switch
right?
coding, no.
Right. We could get into the philosophy of all of that if you want, but no. So with AI, we know that AI has a lot of benefits.
Definitely.
It's designed to help with repetitive processes, to identifying trends, used with statistics, data science is really big now, machine learning, all those things, right? And I call it, I'm a big geek, right? I'm a Star Wars fan. I'm everything, right? When it comes to sci-fi.
Obi-Wan Kenobi on Disney. Did you watch it?
I sure did, sir.
Good man. You're a good man. Look at Charmaine's face.
Yes. So you should see my screen, my wallpaper. It's Star Wars. Just put it that way. So with regards to
Big boys and their toys, right?
Always.
No, don't sleep on this though, because my daughter is a real big fan now of Star Wars. They know I love Star Wars. So when it comes to how AI, the technology is, just keeping the flame going with regards to systemic racism and other biases, is in which how it was coded originally, right? And the makeup of those people, as you said, Ed, someone wrote the book, they're probably white men listening to other white men. Same thing with the early days of AI through to now, more recently, not currently this year, but through recent times,
Sure.
that you didn't have a diverse crew of people working on these technologies and building them and bringing them to life. As I said earlier about having this hodgepodge or this diverse pool of people, thoughts, experiences help you with innovation and creativity. Well, they didn't have a lot of folks who were underrepresented at the table helping, either code it or weigh in from a user group perspective as far as what the experiences might be from this. And there are examples out there. One is, and I'll say it because it's mentioned in Coded Bias, Amazon, up until recent 2000s, like early 2010s, mid 2010s, they were using a resume scanning tool or AI to scan resumes. Well, the benefit of resume scanning is you can pick up on keywords and try to nail down the best fit candidate, that kind of thing, right? Well, it was excluding women's resumes, right?
How was it based on their names?
Right. It sounded feminine. It was names. It could be a few other things too. And this went on. They used this scanning tool for 10 years, right? And they have single digit percentages as far as women in leadership at Amazon. That's also discussed in Coded Bias. And I want to give Coded Bias and Joy. She's the main person, central figure of the story. She's wonderful, and I encourage anyone to watch it. So that's an example. You've heard of the automated interviews. Have you heard of those? Right. So I have all these posts on LinkedIn that speak to it, and I can share it with you all later. And it's interesting because it's, again, a way to, it was designed to help with their hiring, recruiting, talent process. because you have so many candidates you got to screen and all this other stuff. So just imagine you're sitting like we are in a room by yourself, and across from you is a camera, and you're looking in the camera, right? And you're responding to questions, not coming from a real person. So what's happening is the technology, once you're done with your interview, they analyze it. The AI analyzes it. And the AI is used to check how you are sitting, your posture, your expressions on your face, the tone of your voice. So I asked myself, and I asked others, where's the authenticity in that? We like to shake hands as people, right? We like to engage. And you know how we're flowing here in our conversation? You like to do that in an interview. Well, if I left that interview, I would be like, what the heck was that? I wouldn't want to be a part of that. So through that process, as I said at the beginning, the way in which it was coded and whom it was coded, there was some exclusions, right, in that coding, which is a reflection, if you think about it, of the history of our country, right? Excluding. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to interject, but you said so many powerful things, actually. It's why diversity needs to be on top, because you need, if we do not have these conversations and if we do not highlight these, racism and not being included will continue, because AI is going to be coded by people that don't understand or do not embrace collectiveness.
Yeah.
So these are important conversations. I mean, you, Ed, and I can laugh about it. We can laugh about our experiences whilst we share it, but it's no laughing matter.
Yeah.
And from a human perspective, Ed, I mean, you, Jermaine, and I are privileged. I wouldn't call it privileged. We're smart to be able to effect change, and we serve on the boards we do because we're elected and appointed. And some of us are on the boards as a result of white people that open the doors to create the spaces. So the point I'm making is all of us have a role to change the narratives that we face in terms of the DEI space. Am I making my point, Ed?
Yes,
it's like
without a doubt.
People are in positions that I mean, like, if I could, like, I've advanced in my career as well as a result, and Jermaine and Ed, you both have indicated that people have opened doors for us, and while we're on the table, we are changing the narratives, changing the dynamics on the board, having these difficult, uncomfortable conversations, right? And from a personal perspective, we can actually do it. But if we do not have and demonstrate what's not embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion will do to the future, especially from a coding AI perspective, that would be damaging to society. So the talks that you're giving, the awareness that you're creating, we need to have more of this and need to have these uncomfortable conversations. That's the point that I'm making. I hope I've made it eloquently enough for whoever's listening to go, I need to do things differently. I need to question. I need to challenge. I cannot just take things at face value.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on it. It is like I said, Jermaine, or we can sit here all day long talking on so many different subjects around the DEI, and I have two. So I'm not a DEI expert. I share my lived experience. I share some of my thoughts, and I share some of the things that people that look like me have shared with me openly and honestly with a lot of people. One word that always resonates with me, and a lot of companies don't talk about, a lot of DEI people don't talk about, but you said earlier in the conversation, we talk about diversity, we talk about inclusion, we talk about equity, but you brought up a word that I talk about with people as well, but a lot of companies don't talk about: belonging.
Yeah.
because you can set that space for us and we can come in there, but do we feel like we belong there?
Right.
Can you touch on that a little bit? Some of your thoughts on the whole belonging piece?
Yeah. It's a feeling, right? Like you just said, you feel like you belong or you feel like you don't belong. And part of that is feeling like you're included. So there's the connection. I feel like I've been included in this conversation. I've been asked to weigh in or lean in on a subject in the workplace, right? So now that confidence is building, I'm starting to feel like I belong, right? And that's why I was saying that equity and inclusion are so important. They're probably more important than the word diversity, especially now, because so many people leave companies because they feel like they don't belong, right? You didn't include me in this meeting. You excluded me for that meeting. You passed over me for promotion. I don't feel like I belong here, right? Your experience, Charmaine, earlier in your career with the in the boardroom, yeah, that's a great example. You don't feel like you belong when they're talking to you like that, turn their back to you, saying you're wrong and you should go apologize, right? You don't feel like you belong, right? So the belonging is is closely tied with that equity and that inclusion piece. Because if you don't have those two, I'm not going to feel like I belong here. Hope that helps.
Definitely. Charmaine.
You know, if I may just add to the story that I shared, right? I think the reason I got treated the way I got treated was because they were not comfortable or have not had exposure to different people. And for a long time, Mr. Henderson, when he used to see me walking down the passage, he used to pop into somebody's office. He avoided me. The one day I was on the executive floor to see the CEO and I saw him in his office. I knocked on the door, I go in, I go, "Hi, Mr. Henderson, how are you doing?" And he was like, I'm good. And he told me about his weekend. He told me about how the giraffe sat on the other actuary's car. He was flustered because he was not used to anybody challenging him because it was his business. He was not used to a female of color speaking to him that way. He didn't know how to break the ice. And since then, we became friends, actually. So the point I'm making, sometimes you can sit in your corner and go, "Oh, they don't like me, da-di-da." You have to take the first step to break the ice and show them that to demonstrate to people that we're all human beings. And sometimes it takes two people to bridge the gap. So imagine if I didn't step into his office or have a conversation.
Yeah.
The rest of my life, he would have just ignored me. So
Yeah.
it's about like showing up in ways that are uncomfortable but needed to be done. So yeah, that's my point, actually.
I like what you, I like what you said there, because you have to, when you talk about unconscious bias, right? You have to extend sometimes the olive branch to others, right? And how do you have those uncomfortable conversations? How do you break the ice and things of that nature? That's a big up for you to do that. And you have a friend for life now, because now they get to see.
Oh, he's passed on, actually. But
oh, I'm sorry. Sorry to hear, but you have someone that sees you in a different light, right? And I think it's so important for people to understand that you get past the stereotypes, you get past the status quo, things of that nature. We're all people. We all are human beings, right? We have been on this earth evolving, and unconscious bias is there. It doesn't make us a bad person. We all have it. We have biases. It helps us survive all these years. You got to have some biases, because biases also are shortcuts that sometimes can lead you astray. Right? Because you're categorizing people or putting people in a certain corner or a certain category. That's not fair. But once you take the time, and of course you had to force the issue with Mr. Henderson, it broke the ice. And now you can start having more candid conversations. This stuff is not rocket science, people, leaders who are out there listening, that kind of thing. Yeah.
It's about having real, authentic conversation. And I think the biggest gift we could give ourselves is no matter who hurts us or breaks us down, forgive them. That's why you
Grace.
Yes.
travel lighter to be able to demonstrate what humanity as a whole is capable of when we do work together.
Yes.
You know, it's just like when we talk equity, oh my God, we can talk forever. We didn't even go to half the things I needed to ask this Mr. Stanley.
I got a real good feeling Mr. Stanley's going to be back because we're gonna run this back because I still got questions because you talk about artificial intelligence and law enforcement. And I know that's going to probably be a whole session in itself. I'm curious about that, but we'd love to be respectful of people's time and things like. I'd love for you to share. Like I ask people an interesting question at the end. Money, and sometimes it's changes. Do you have a magic wand? What you get your magic wand, and what would it be for you? Money being no object, you're not getting paid for anything. What would you be doing right now?
Wow. If money was no object and I didn't have to worry about, life in
You'd
general.
be in space.
There you go. I'll catch a ride on one of the pedestrian regular folk, Blue Origin or something like that. Take a flight up into outer space.
Yeah.
I would do that. I sorry, just a big geek, man. I'm just curious about it.
Nah, that's not a big geek. That's not a big geek. I absolutely love that. They would have to make a special session for you because we want to make sure that you have leg room. Because I know just these regular commercial flights, I'm only 6'1", and my knees be killing me. So I'm sure I can only imagine how you're feeling.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yes, that's what I would do if money were no object. I'd rather be in outer space, man. Looking at the world, looking down at the world. Yeah.
That's good.
This has been like a fantastic conversation, especially we didn't go into the meat of stuff, because there's so many things that we need to unpack, right? Mm-hmm. Because if I had to throw a word out there, equality or kindness, everybody goes, oh my God, I am kind. And yes, kindness should be the norm, right? But if we look at the conception of things, what kindness means to me is, and why am I saying this though? Because if I mention equality or equity, we can go into a little bit of a tangent. Everybody says I'm kind. But when we look at the detail of it, we're very, what can I say, selective as what that kindness means for me. Mm-hmm. We all are not on the same page. So that's the point I'm actually making. But there's so much I want to chat with you, Jermaine. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of it, but I do hope this resonates with the people that we need to. And those that are feeling like they don't belong, that they take the steps to demonstrate why they're there and why they should belong. And those that have not embraced, do whatever it takes to be able to embrace all people to get to the outcome we wish to achieve. But before I keep quiet, I'd love for you to land your final points. I'm sorry, I just get so passionate about things that impact humanity that I kind of go off on a bit of a tangent. So yes, Jermaine, your closing points for us, please.
Well, we've touched on a lot, and still a lot more to touch upon. And I've said before, and I'll say it again in other forms, that if the pandemic has not shown us anything, if it's shown us one thing, rather, it's shown us that we still have a lot of work to do across all fronts. And this is not just a United States thing. It's a global thing.
Yep.
Right. And again, another topic we can talk about. But I would say to the leaders who happen to tune in that you got to make the meaningful change at the top, as Ed was saying. You got to start at the top. And if you do those things, your culture will benefit from it. innovation and creativity would benefit from it. And of course, your position in the marketplace will improve, as well as your social responsibility. Because you think about these companies, we're in communities. We have headquarters, we have locations, offices in many communities around the world, different companies. And if you have a workforce in that region or that community that comes from a culture that embraces DEI, those types of initiatives, what do you think is going to happen when they leave the work space or the workplace at the end of the day? They're going to go home and go back to their communities. So that mindset's going to carry with them out into the world. So that's why it's important that you embrace it versus not embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion, or initiatives that support and promote DEI. My 2 cents.
I know, very valuable 2 cents. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stanley, Master Connector, because we didn't even touch on that one, because I'm curious about that Master Connector. This has been another Ubuntu Connected conversation. Mr. Stanley, thank you for joining the Ubuntu House. Always, as I started earlier, I'm always privileged and honored to host this space with the amazingly beautiful Mr. Jermaine Stanley. Thank you for tuning in. We look forward to continuing this conversation. Have this conversation at home. Have this conversation with your children. They are the future. Let's just have this conversation, even though it's uncomfortable at times. It's okay to be uncomfortable. The only time that you grow sometimes is an uncomfortable situation. So we look forward to continuing this conversation because we're not done, but continue to join us and follow us on our journey as we have inspiring conversations with people across the globe. Thank you for tuning in. God bless, and we wish you all the best. Take
Love
care.
and light, everyone. Thank you, Jermaine. And happy birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yes, tomorrow.
Happy birthday to you. Yeah, we
Remember that one? Stevie Wonder.
Yeah, there you go. All right, everyone. Have a great one.
Take
Cheers.
care.
And thank you.